Our next part of the day is really going to be hearing stories from families and their journeys in creating housing, utilizing community partnerships, and all that social capital it takes to have those partnerships happen. We're going to be, our moderator for this section is going to be Paul Arnston. And I want to tell you a little bit about Paul. Paul is currently a professor emeritus of communication studies at Northwestern University. He is on the faculty of the Asset-Based Community Development Institute and continues to teach courses in communication studies and in the School of Education and Social Policy. Paul received his PhD from the University of Wisconsin in communication arts with a concentration in educational psychology. Professor Arnston founded and directed Northwestern University's undergraduate leadership program. He also founded Northwestern University Public Interest Program that places graduating seniors in a public interest fellowship each year. He teaches at the Center for Global Engagement and works with students in Africa, India, Central America, and South America. Professor Arnston has conducted research and training worldwide, focusing on improving citizen decision-making competencies concerning health and well-being in their own communities. He has worked for the Center of Independent Futures to help us create community living options for adults with disabilities for years. His help has been invaluable. It's with great gratitude and appreciation. I'd like to now hand you over to the capable hands of Professor Paul Arnston.
Thank you. Thanks. Let's see, is this Hush Puppy on? Okay, good. I'm really here to just moderate this panel, and since I know some of the people on the panel, it's going to be difficult. But oh, hi, Valerie. All right, okay. I just got a couple of remarks that I'd just like to share right at the beginning. You know, it's just a pleasure to be here with all you community activists, because that's who you are, because you are trying to activate the community space necessary for your young adults to be in a safe living environment, to have nurturing relationships, and to have a reciprocal sense of being helped, but also helping. All right, and that's what I think we're all looking for in our own lives, and certainly in the lives of whoever we are in contact with in our own families. Right, and what we have up here, we have some people who are in what I would call a transformational state. What do I mean by that? Well, all these years that I've worked in different settings, I've never met people who have been more socialized to be aggressive individual clients of educational professionals, medical professionals, and social service professionals. You've just been socialized to do that. It's been an individual role, okay? Now you have to transform into being basically collaborative decision makers, partners with other people, trusting them, and they trust you in order so that you can take this community space and transform it. Because it's just not about transformation inside of you from being clients to collaborative citizens, but it's also you need to be transformational in how you change communities in terms of how they think about the people who have differences in your life and how they can be contributors, not just takers. So here we have community activists. They're going to share their expertise. They're going to share how they are transforming themselves and transforming their communities. We have two sets of people where they have established houses, living arrangements in their communities, and we have two sets of people here who are in that process. But I must say, once you establish a house or some apartments, it's not over. It's the end of the beginning, okay? And because then it's a continuous process. So I think we're going to start with Carol and Jill, who come from CIF and who have indeed are in a living option there. Okay? And by the way, 15 minutes, and I brought my Nerf gun. Okay? All right.
First, I just want to comment on one thing that Paul said about our job educating others and kind of bringing them on board. Jill, from a very young age, had a test that she gave to any professional we saw, whether it was a doctor or a educator. If Jill and I would be in the room and the doctor would look at me and say, well, what is Jill would like sit up real straight, like, ask me, don't ask my mother. And so that was always our little test that we would give people before we would agree to work with them. And certainly Jane Doyle passed that test with flying colors. She talked directly to Jill about the program. But first, my husband and I were involved. Jill was about, help me with the age, 22, 23 when we started this, before you moved into Harrison. 20.
How old was I when I graduated? Well,
22,
What?
23, around there, 22.
yeah, I was 22 when I graduated.
Okay. So luck would have it that I actually ran into Jane Doyle, who had been a teacher at the Y for a Moms and Tots class that Jill and I had taken previously, many years previously. And, you know, I talked to her about we were at this point now. Jill's siblings were moving into their own apartments, or they were away at college, and Jill wanted to do the same thing. So we began talking about what options were available, and we quickly found out there were no options, and we had to create our own. So with that, basically, many parents got together and were talking about what our needs were, and a house was purchased, I believe, by I don't know who purchased it, but we all got together, those of us who were interested, and rented. We were all involved in interviewing the staff who would be at the house, and that was a really crucial part. We were also involved in interviewing the life skills tutors, and I don't mean just the adults were involved. Jill was involved in that process also. And so right away, it felt good to know that our voices were being heard, and what we wanted was what we were going to get. And it wasn't someone else making the decisions for us. We were clearly a community organization, community-based. In 2003, just before Jill was going to move into Harrison, which was a 3-flat in Evanston, word had gotten out in the neighborhood that there was this group moving in and our children were no longer going to be safe. Do you remember that? And so we all band together and we killed them with kindness, and we had a big open house, served a little wine and cheese.
Kindness.
That's true. So anyway, people from the neighborhood came, and I would say by the end of the evening, they were offering to come and change light bulbs if anyone needed help. They had a block party for Labor Day weekend and invited all of us to come, which we did. So we did ultimately feel very welcome in the neighborhood. I think I had more adjustment problems than she did. I think I probably called Jane daily with some concern, and now I can go a week without talking to Jill. It's clearly amazing, and I think that's the thing you have to remember, is the beginning of any new experience is difficult. There's a learning curve. There are just so many unanswered questions, but you kind of have to trust that this works.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting us to come here. I would have brought one of our stars. That's what we call our residents, stars. But routine is so important to them. They had to go to work, each of the people I've asked. So I'm here kind of representing a large group. As an organization, we support a community that was established in the early 60s at College Church in Wheaton. We developed a disability ministry program as an outreach to individuals with disabilities, and then about 5 years later, developed an outreach to their families. It started with a half a dozen people, but now has grown to over 135 families that are involved, mostly from the Wheaton, Carroll Stream, Glen Ellen area, but DuPage County. They are not all members of College Church. We don't make membership at College Church a requirement, but it creates a critical mass of people that we can put resources around. As that group aged, the elders of our church suggested that we should investigate the idea of a housing program. And we had a mother and her son who wanted a housing program, and she created a special needs trust, and when they passed, it was our seed money. It was about $115,000. That was about 8 years ago. And 7 years ago, we formed a committee to look at all of these things, whereupon we discovered Center for Independent Futures. And they offered a training program. We had two of our people go to that training program, learned a great deal. As a committee, we started looking at other organizations. We looked at state-run facilities. We looked at other private organizations. And that's how we got started in the housing program. Our founder was Gene Hooten. We started out with a group of about 8 anxious board members, and we now have over 30 volunteers, about 21 employees, and we service 15 people in our homes and another 18 in a job coaching program. Our vision, as we started out, we really struggled with all the hurdles, and I learned a technique in business called the parking lot, and all those hurdles that we didn't want to deal with then, I convinced the group to put in the parking lot and that we would revisit. And so we came down to what group were we going to focus on. We have a quite diverse group from what I would call very high needs, where one-on-one is important, to highly functional that could probably live on their own, but with support. And so we chose to focus on the largest population first, which in special needs is men, predominantly Downs, and we tried a pilot program where we had some guys live together in what we call Washington House, which is the picture at the left, a nice winter scene. We converted a 1950s 3-bedroom ranch with 1.5 baths to a 5-bedroom with 3 baths. We went with the model that CIF has and created a community builder space, and then 4 unrelated individuals, which meets the codes in the city of Wheaton. We offer 2 life skills tutors during the day. We kick everybody out of the house at a minimum of 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock because we want them to be in community. And then we also involve our parents, which is something very unique to us. What we saw in some settings was kind of the abandonment of families, and in some cases they really didn't want the families around because it kind of got in their way of their programs. And we've said, no, we want to keep families involved, and so 2 hours a week, families come in and spend time with their son or daughter and their friends. It's a regular fixed time, and that's really helped us maintain that family tie. Our individuals are engaged in a community life. We're very fortunate that the disability ministry at College Church not only meets on Sunday mornings, which is very traditional, but we have music programs Sunday evening. We have other music programs on Wednesday evening, and every other Friday we have what we call Friday Night Fun. And one of those Friday nights is also a parent support group. And so that creates a core of friendships that in some cases, for example, the Women's House, which is named for Gene Hooten, 4 of the 5 women in there have known each other for 15 to 20 years. So community is established, and we're extending community by what we're doing. We have a network of supporters. We employ all of our residents in one of two resale shops that College Church operates. So we've hired a person to do job coaching and training of other job coaches. And then we have a life skills supervisor who manages our homes. And we're at that point now as we're preparing for House 3 here, which we had our community builder couple, which is the first time we've tried that. A young couple moved in 2 weekends ago. And so they're starting to establish their home, and then we'll be moving guys in there in November. But we're at this frenetic time right now in that we're selecting residents for that house, and so I keep getting texts even while I've been here from our life skills supervisor on this person and that person, and we've invited them for dinners at our other house so we can observe them. For some people that we don't know we have to balance personalities and skills, and so it's kind of an odd time. Some of the lessons learned was maintaining family involvement. We try very hard not to make this a consumer relationship. It's a partnership. And so when we get confronted with, well, what are you going to do when? We say, well, it's not about what we're going to do, what are you going to do? And how can we help you make that decision? It's a very hard balance to maintain this consumer versus partnership. But by keeping the families involved and creating that routine where they're there, it really helps that process. We've managed through the death of one surviving spouse into the next generation of siblings who now are involved with their brother. We've managed through some tough things. And each time what's amazing to me is how our stars look at their home as being where they're living now, not where they were living before. To the point where we've had some mothers in tears over that. The other lesson learned is adapting to behavior issues. We say we won't do for our residents what our residents can do for themselves. We call it appropriate independence, and it's different for each star. But one of the things that we do is an interview with the family, a very frank interview, and we're going through that right now, where we sit down and we say, and we ask them, tell us if there are other stars that your star struggles with. Be honest with us. We won't go farther. It doesn't mean we'll exclude them. We just need to know how to adapt. And we also say, what are some behaviors or triggers? And we had one of our families in our first home tell us, well, our son has they didn't call it stealing. They said he likes to take things. And we went, no big deal. Well, now we've learned when you hear a little, and so we've adapted to that very well, but we have really worked at that. And we've gone through the cycle of what motivates him to do that, and we learned that the forgiveness and the hugging after he confesses is what he was doing it for. And so now we've backed off, and we've learned a lot with that. The other issue with behavior is, we're now entering into what I would call some disabilities that are more in the autistic range. And so we're really balancing well how much support do we give and where do we go with regard to, because we've maintained a pretty good ratio of 1 to 4 or 1 to 5, and we stretch it to 6 on occasion, and that's worked for us. The last thing I'll say is that we built 6 bedrooms in both of these last 2 homes with an apartment in the upstairs. We found that it was really important for our community builder to have their own space, because the moment they walk into, like, the ranch, they're on, whether they're on duty or not, they're on. Because the community builder, while they're really on from 8 o'clock at night till 7 o'clock in the morning, they are the glue that holds it together, because it's that evening devotion time, that evening family meeting where conflicts are resolved and other issues are dealt with. But we've left one room open in each of these rooms for respite. We discovered as we surveyed our population that especially a lot of single mothers where their husband has passed, they've put off surgeries because what would they do with their star? And so by offering a resident a respite program where they could put their star for 1 to 2 weeks, that's going to free them up to do that knee surgery or that hip surgery. We also have other families that would like to take missions trips to do different things, but they can't because of their star. And so this will allow them to do that. It's just it's kind of an idea that kicked up as we were struggling with our staff to resident ratio, and we piloted it this summer, and it went well. We got stretched a bit, but it went well. So that's what we've learned, and thank you very much.
My name is Valerie, and this is my sister Andrea. Andrea and I come from a family of 8 children. And this really started, the top picture, how our group was formed. We're about 50 miles south of here, and Frankfurt is like a transportation desert. Public transportation hard to come by. Our group really got formed through a series of exposures socially at the high school, Lincoln Way East High School. And I had met Paul giving up my career practicing law. I went back to school to get a communications degree, and I was in Paul's class. And you don't know what you don't know. And I learned that my son was ready to go over a cliff as soon as he left high school. And I didn't know how much community I needed. So I went home and I said, okay, it's time to get the group together to go to prom, which is a hard thing to do. You don't want to take them to prom in the special ed bus, right? I went out to the community and I told people my story. I've got 5 to 6 young men who want to go to prom. It's cost prohibitive. What can you do to help me? And that snowballed into people donating tuxedos and limousines and flowers and photography, all of those things. And I learned at that moment how important it was to tell my story to everybody that would listen. So this was in 2014, and a month after I got these families together for this prom, and that's my neighbor's backyard. My neighbor said, I did $10,000 of landscaping. Please come take pictures or my wife will kill me, right? So we went, and it snowed that day. So the umbrellas are there. I got the families together, and they knew that I was interested and I cared. So I had one moment of social capital. So the next month I said, please come meet my friend Paul and my new friend Jane. And I had 20 families come, and I said, here's what I want to do. I want to stop hoping that I outlive my child. I want to stop hoping that. And it took us another 8 months before we scheduled our first workshop. And Jen has been training us. It's been phenomenal, really has. Andrea her son is much younger than these other young boys. They're all 19, 20, 21. They're all in the school transition program. They have jobs in the community. They're the wolf pack. They get together when they can to go to games and things like that. And Andrea's son is just starting high school. So I asked her, would she please be part of our group because we need the second wave. I was already thinking like Jane does. I've got something here, but I need to include people that will be the messengers for the next group, for the next facility that we decide we're going to set up. So that's how our group really came together, was just this moment where I said, I can do this, and I'm getting ready to do my group in a year from now or 6 months from now. So where we're at now, we're about to start our 4th workshop, our 4th and last. That's tomorrow. And it's exciting for us because we're finalizing our structure. We're finalizing what the house is going to look like. We've learned how to get some consensus. We've learned to bring new folks into our group and rebuild consensus. During the course of this, the bottom picture, Max is my son just to the left of me. And he wanted to raise money for Big Brothers Big Sisters Bowl for Kids' Sake. So I helped him do something online. He sent out all his messages on Facebook and whatever else kids do. Twitter, WordPress, you name it. And in a week, he raised almost $2,000. So when he gets on the internet and he has a cause, he doesn't have a disability. He's doing what everyone else is doing. It was really great. And it was team building for our guys, and everyone else in the community saw them volunteer. So they were reintroduced to what this group of young men who would be living in the community could do for the rest of our community. We're looking at a 4 to 5 bedroom house, although I love this idea of respite and a community couple. And I've already got like 4 people in my head. that I think could do it, right? That I want to talk to. So we've got an idea about what our structure would look like, and we brought in 2 ideas. You know, we want to do either a house that has 5 to 6 bedrooms or a small apartment complex so that we can have more people living in the building and really have community interdependence. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. Our big lessons learned, tell your story to anybody that will listen. And you will find that your community has something to give to you if they just know you're out there. The gentleman who donated the tuxedos has a grandson on the autism spectrum, and he had a lot of questions for me about special education. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. So I found someone in my community I could relate to. A person who donated flowers, her great aunt started Misericordia. So she had a connection with me. So tell your story. Even if you think you have nothing in common, you will find something in common, I promise you. The other lesson that I learned was eat together and relax together. People will tell you things you never imagined they would share over food and something to drink. They will. They will, and when your group gets together and you can't reach consensus, it's having had that conversation over food and drink that reminds you we're all really just trying our best. When you have disagreement in your group, we're all just really trying our best.
There's not really much more that I can add other than I am so grateful and so fortunate that I get on this process early on. As Valerie said, my son is much younger. He is 14. He is on the autism spectrum. And he knows when you turn 16, you get your driver's license. So as a parent of a child who has challenges, sometimes we get bogged down with, he's never going to be able to get to do that. But being part of this process has shown me that it is possible, that my son is going to be independent, that I can have high hopes for him. The other thing that he has decided is that he is going to be a police officer. I don't know if this is because he had a fascination at a very early age with 911. Yes, SWAT has been to my house. But being a part of this process has enabled me to start telling his teachers and his paraprofessionals at school, this is his goal. And I am going to make sure that he gets to reach his goal. And I need you to help me. And I need you to connect me with other families because this is where this is going. And so I get to be able to build my network now that my son will be able to make friends, just like Max has, and that when they get ready to transition, they already have a network, that he won't be reduced to living in a facility where he's living with strangers.
Okay, I'll start. I'm Jane, and then William's going to talk about the lessons learned. We came together through Our Place, which is an association that we formed about 8 years ago to solve the issue of how do you make a meaningful day in the community for young adults with developmental disabilities. So when we felt we'd been pretty successful with that, and when the opportunity came along to do this CIF project, we put it out to our families, and 13 families stepped up and said they were ready to participate in this with us. So we started the training, and 2 phenomenal things happened, I think, very quickly with the group. This 13-family group coalesced and said, we want to solve housing for every one of us. There wasn't this sense that some people will drop out, we can only do one house, and so we formed this vision. And one of the other clear things that families said was they did not want their young adults to lose any of the independence or functioning that they currently had developed. So those were 2 keys that we carried forward. So the vision became, we're going to solve this issue for our initial group, which is 13 families, and we would do it with possibly a couple of anchor houses that would have 3 to 4 individuals, and we could do social activities around those houses, like get together for cooking and watching football games, baseball games, so that these would be a gathering place. And then the individuals in the group who didn't want to be part of that large of an opportunity would be in apartments also in the community, but it would be all connected. There would be this social connection that would also be fostered through Our Place, which is the organization that creates the Meaningful Day. So again, it was this collaboration of the families and building, continuing to build these strong social community connections in our area. Anyway, it's so let me just say, we finished the training, and the group has committed to the ongoing development of these houses, and we're in the process with a soft goal of summer or spring of 2016 to have the first house ready to go.
So I'm the executive director at Our Place, and so one question would be, well, Jane has a connection with both. She's the president and founder, and that's Frank. But one reason why Our Place is involved, I didn't realize it until today, Al, but we're a natural gatekeeper and bridge builder. So one of the ongoing problems that families relate to us is around residential. So although we're not currently a residential provider, it's a problem and we want to help find a solution. And I think for this family group, we're able to provide some cohesion and a focal point so we can rally round a central point and keep things moving. We've just finished the training. So in terms of lessons learned, I would say a couple of things. One is try and build a process. So there's always going to be, in terms of families, sharing of stories, wanting to talk about what's happened, what's not happening, but really try and have a process. Now, whether that means you're able to use an outside facilitator or literally just take a process that's out there, but try and follow it and trust it, and try and put in structures so you can keep moving things forward. And I think the other thing I'd say about a lesson learned, or something that we try and keep to, is it's very easy to focus on the problems and why things don't work, but try and generate that feeling as to what is the solution. And try and brainstorm and come up with ideas, but be creative. It's very easy, I think, for any group to sort of get dragged down by the problems and the challenges. But really think about what is the solution, what is possible. And I think one other thing about the process, a final lesson learned, is that I would advise having an early conversation around the state of the marketplace. You know, what currently is out there. Have a discussion about Scylla, what's available, what are your chances of being selected for Scylla. Because what I found is that families actually come with a wide degree of knowledge. There's an assumption that everyone comes with full knowledge. So have that discussion early, because then that allows you to start building the process and the structure to go forward. And the other lesson is provide food.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we have, I think we have some time now for questions.
So you mentioned that the laws and regulations in Wheaton say that only 4 unrelated people can live in a home. How do you get away with a community builder then?
There are two levels in Wheaton, and it's pretty common that communities that have gone to establish commissions for group care home or group homes have followed pretty much this national trend of anywhere from 4 to 6 unrelated. The code actually is 5 unrelated, with one of them being a service provider. So I probably misspoke when I said, but it's 4 residents, 4 residents. The other step is, let me just go back. That's without having to ask for a variance. You can just do it. And so that's the easiest one to do without creating an environment for NIMBY to kick in. And so that was our first home. We stayed kind of under the radar by doing it that way. Still had to go get a group home commission license. We kind of fought that a bit. We weren't quite the activists that Jane was in Evanston, but we kind of demanded that, these people have rights to have their own home, and the city listened to us. I think the biggest hurdle for us in that regard, though, was just our fear that they wouldn't, when in fact they were very cooperative. But the second step, and most communities have this, is that with a variance, you can go up to 15.
Wow.
Now, we know that the national trend is 4 to 6, and we also know from experience that you get beyond 6, it starts to feel like a facility. Doesn't feel like a home. Our best compliment at Washington House, when people come there for the first time, this is like someone's home. And we said, yes, it is. And so the city really worked with us because we had someone donate money for land that would allow us to build a 15-person home, but we didn't really want to build a 15-person home. And so the other regulation in Wheaton, and it's not uncommon, is that group homes can't be within 500 feet of each other. So we went and approached for a 15-person license with 2 facilities side by side. So between the 2 facilities, we can't exceed 15 people. But that allowed us to kind of stay within the neighborhood setting and still kind of meet our needs for keeping it smaller in terms so it doesn't start to feel like a facility.
So do your folks use SILA funding, or are they private pay?
We chose not to become SILA. I spent a lot of time talking with DHS. In fact, I found that DHS, the director there, was my advocate. He said, you have every right to not, to open a home for these individuals. And you don't have to have a SILA license. We chose not to go that route because of what we felt were some conflicts in our flexibility in operating a home the way we would like, mostly related to our faith-based nonprofit status. But the funding is still traditional. It's Social Security, it's home-based waivers, but we have some that have gotten housing vouchers, but that list is really backlogged, and so we haven't had a lot of success with that yet.
I have the same question, Valerie, for Wolfpack. Are you planning on using state licensing SILA providers? You also did refer to what you're doing as facility, or are you planning on using private pay?
I love that question because we're finding all different answers to it. We started off as a group focused on anything but SILA. Absolutely did not want to do SILA. We wanted freedom of choice. We wanted, if our young men had said, I want this service but not that service, that they would use home-based services, home-based waivers, so they could choose a la carte. And when we sat down and explained to these young guys, there might be a lot more money with this SILA, but it's not yours. It goes to the facility, and they're going to decide what it's going to be spent on. And they all said, well, if it's my money, how come it's not in my wallet? How come I can't choose? So it was very simple for the folks, these young guys who are going to be impacted by it, that they wanted freedom of choice. So our group initially started out to be anything but SILA, home-based waivers, and we were going to find a home that they could live in. They all knew each other. A house. They would have their own bedroom, and we started off with the 5 criteria. First thing, right, Paul? Consensus on what you're looking for, and what were the 5 things we absolutely had to have. And that was that they all wanted their own bedroom, but they wanted common space that they could go to, that they could watch television, things of that nature. We had a family join our group after in our second workshop, and they seemed like they really could benefit from having SILA money, that the needs for their son were much greater than the other initial set of 5 boys. So I've asked Al to help me out, and here, because I don't have an answer to the question, can a person with a disability who has SILA funding live in the same structure or home with folks who have a home-based waiver? When I go to service providers, I was hoping they would answer it for me, say, I've got some young men who want a la carte. And they said, sure, you could do that. And I was surprised by the answer, because nobody who holds the purse strings, who gives away the money, or gives the money for home-based services, would say that's okay. I can guarantee you no one will be kicked off the roll if they live together. No one who makes the decision about the money would confirm that for me. But the service providers, who I think are very interested in having customers were willing to tell us anything that we wanted to hear. So I guess that would be another lesson that I've learned, is that some of the answers you get still requires that your group go back and talk about it and ask some very pointed questions about what does Scylla money mean? And it means by this much choice.
How much money is needed for these homes? I mean, to be honest, I come from a community that's primarily low income, and as much as the families would love this opportunity, I think it would be much harder for them to put their resources together.
We have 2 buckets. We are planning a 3rd bucket, but we're not there yet. But our first bucket is operating funds. Our second bucket is capital funds. So you do need money, but that money can come from a variety of sources. The operating funds, probably most of your community would qualify for various support, whether it's Social Security or something else, and that pretty much takes care of I would say 75 to 80% of the operating funds that are required. We do fundraisers. We've been very fortunate. We have a group of volunteers that do some grant writing, and we're very fortunate to have a group of ladies who donate their time, and we have a spring concert where we last year raised $115,000 just in that. So our goal is that, here's how we say it, we lose about $85,000 a year on our homes, and that's what we try to go out and fundraise each year. So that's kind of a rule of thumb that we use. $85,000 a year you need to raise. That the rest of it comes from outside sources, mostly through the individual's work.
Well, I don't have an answer to that question, but that was one of the lessons learned that I brought up, that actually I think having that conversation right up front about the financial piece provides everyone with an understanding. But then at the same time, it's a problem, but actually as the group starts to work and you start shaking the trees, you start perhaps to find some potential sources of funds that you never knew existed. But I think it's worth having that discussion up front so people have a clear understanding of what the challenge is before you then head off to see if you can find the solutions.
Houses of worship are a great source of social capital, I think. You just mentioned fundraising in some way. I imagine that your church is involved in supporting your project, your housing project. Are there other ways that members who are fortunate to be in your congregation are making other kinds of connections, like for jobs or for socializing, or can you address that, and how do you try to connect your congregants with disabilities or people who are living in your homes with your congregations that might support them through the lifespan?
Being a faith-based nonprofit is both a positive and a negative. The negative is that when we approach certain foundations, they don't want to touch us because we're faith-based. And then I say, well, do you give to Catholic Charities? Well, of course we give to Catholic Charities. But we haven't gotten real aggressive with that yet. But we try to be persistent. But the good side is that we have a critical mass of people who are sensitive to the disability community, because we have this rich heritage that goes back to the 60s, over 50 years of supporting disabled families. It was modeled by one of the founders of ServiceMaster. That's the next quick key, who was told when his son was born, put him in an institution, tell your wife that he died. That's what they did back then in the 50s. And he said, nope, I'm going to sit him on the front row of the church. And as a family, that's what they did. So that's kind of how it started in our church. We are not financially connected to College Church. We are a separate 501c3. However, our largest base of donors are the congregants of College Church, which has now expanded into the community. We're very fortunate to have men and women who are prominent in various businesses. ServiceMaster doesn't exist anymore, but they had a very large foundation, which we were beneficiaries of. So we ask for volunteers. We invite congregants over to dinners with our women, dinners with our guys. Again, we've created community. It's not just the special needs community, it's the community of Wheaton. One of the best things that I had a city councilman say when we went through this process was, I wasn't sure if I was for this, but now I realize these are people from our town.
Yeah,
this is our community.
exactly.
Of course we'll support this.
Exactly.
So again, I think what someone else said, you said this, was tell your story. The biggest hurdle is your own fear. Go out and tell your story, and you'll find people who want to help.
To answer Rocio's question over there, I think, I don't remember your name, ma'am. Right up front, yeah.
Valerie.
Maybe you can, what are you planning on doing or hoping to do to get the capital needed? The individuals over here are faith-based organizations or organizations that are established. What are you doing as an individual or a family to move towards, the capital needs for your children?
Sure. So thank you for that question. The first thing that we had to do was, of course, look at the market in our area, and we have one gentleman who is consistently contacting and reaching out to real estate agents to find out, and he's always looking at property. We've also done something that CIF, I think, initially did, and that was to look for a developer or someone in the community to partner with who wanted to continue this model, saw it as the wave of the future. So we've actually found one developer who is interested in helping us establish that. So we have yet, once we get through our fourth workshop and figure out what the structure is going to look like, then invite this person to come and talk to our group about financially, how would it look? And from a legal perspective, what would be his requirements, the contract that we have, what would be his requirements in terms of who could live in that building and who could not, and who could he sell it to and still have those covenants and restrictions, whatever you want to call them, attached to that contract. So the first thing we had to do was figure out whether or not there was somebody that could work alongside of us, and then have the very real conversation about, okay, who has what? If we form a LLC or we form a 501c3, what is each family going to be able to contribute? And that's a tough and a fear-filling, sometimes embarrassing conversation to talk about money. We're not really trained to do it. So we first talked about a developer that we could work alongside with. Then we talk about what each family wants to bring into it and how do we want to structure. And then fundraising to be able to provide some more startup funds in the community. And one piece of advice I got was to sort of keep that on the down low while you're feeling out your community. You want to be able to establish through your social capital what your group is, and that these are people from your community who want a life like any other. And to do all that before you start saying, I would like a variance to the law. You've already established your group, and you don't have that not in my backyard mentality. So we sort of kept it on the down low in terms of where we could find additional fundraising without saying too much about what our group can do until we know we've got community support.
Hi, thank you for all this invaluable information. But I just wanted to get a timeline, from concept to operational, getting people together and to actually.
Oh, for us?
For everybody, everybody.
A rough time,
We were fortunate enough to have the Coleman Foundation help us. And when Jane and I sat down and talked about it, we looked at a timeline of 2 to 2.5 years to get this done. Our guys are still in the high school transition program and won't be leaving the program for probably another 1.5 years. So we're a year into the process already. We probably got another 1.5 years.
I would say it took us about 2 to 3 years from the inception to the actual moving in.
2.5 years from when our committee first met to when we opened our first home. But then it was 4 years till we opened our second and third home. So it kind of takes a leap after that.
We started the training in January of 2015, and I think it's optimistic to think that we're going to have a house spring or summer of 2016, but that's our goal. So.
Okay.
I'm part of the Our House group, so this is for everybody else except Jill, the 2 newcomers. How does employment work into your houses? Because it's not just a house, it's a life. It's a total
Right,
person-centered
right.
life. So how do we get those able in their own way out into the community, not just sleeping in a house, doing things like each and every one of us sitting here do on a daily, 7-day-a-week basis?
So I'm fortunate with CIF to be a community connector bridge builder, a new project, a pilot project. So I've been out in the community trying to find my volunteers basically to build a bridge, to help our young folks who've spent so much time with paid professionals to learn social skills, social expertise, and be out in the community meeting people. And the reception has been phenomenal. And our community already knows most of these young folks through our transition program at the high school. They're connected with businesses in the community. So they've seen many of our young guys out in the community working, right? It's been a big, for the most part, parent push to say, we're here, we want a life like any other. Disability is not about something medical. Disability is about a social barrier, an economic barrier, and they want to work. And CIF now has these great index cards that say the turnover rate for a person with a disability is like 8%. I give those to everybody. Again, telling my story. So I have just, as a parent, found a pilot project that I can attach myself to and I can tell my community about and continue to tell them until everyone says, we know all about that, Valerie, come on in.
Jill's been working at the same job for 11 years. 11 in November, sorry, almost.
Building and sustaining this communities of people and finding supports for them and then the ongoing decision-making processes. This is not simple stuff. So this is pretty complex stuff and, human beings can certainly overcome that complexity.